I still remember the exact date. January 3rd, 2023. Not because it was someone's birthday or a special occasion, but because that was the night I fully realized I was broke. It's completely and undeniably broke. It was 11:42 p.m. and I was lying on a sunken, worn-out couch in my friend Jordan's small one-bedroom apartment in a rough part of Chicago. The radiator was broken, and the window had a crack that let in just enough freezing air to make me regret every life decision that led me here. I pulled the hoodie tighter around my face, trying to keep warm, staring blankly at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind wouldn't let me rest. That night, I checked my bank account, maybe out of habit, maybe out of denial, hoping I'd find a miracle deposit. The screen showed $4.12. That was it. $4.12. No savings, no job, no credit left, no car, no plan. I had reached the end. The strangest part, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw my phone. I just stared at that number until the screen dimmed. It was as if my body and mind had nothing left to give. I'd run on fumes for weeks, maybe months, and now I had nothing left. Earlier in the year, I had a job, a modest marketing role at a mid-sized company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I thought I was on the right track, but then came the layoffs. The company downsized, and I got one of those dreaded restructuring emails. It's no warning, no backup plan, just a sudden stop. At first, I wasn't worried. I had about $3,000 in savings, a few months of rent paid, and what I thought were useful skills. I figured I'd bounce back quickly, but week after week, the rejection emails piled up. Some companies ghosted me altogether. Others led me on with multiple rounds of interviews, only to tell me they were going in a different direction. I applied for everything: marketing roles, admin work, customer service, anything I thought I could do. Each no chipped away at my confidence. I stopped believing in my resume. Then I stopped believing in myself. The job hunt depression crept in quietly, and I didn't even notice at first. I numbed myself with takeout and endless Netflix binges. I told myself I was just resting or recharging between applications, but in truth, I was hiding. I was scared. I racked up $6,000 in credit card debt over 5 months trying to stay afloat and avoid asking for help. I didn't want to look like a failure. I told my family I was pivoting. I didn't mention that I had sold half my stuff and couldn't afford rent anymore. Eventually, I had to move out. I packed 2 duffel bags with what I had left and asked Jordan if I could crash for a while. He didn't hesitate to say yes, and I'm forever grateful. But there's a different kind of pain that comes from being a guest in someone else's space, especially when you've got nothing to offer. I tried to stay out of his way. I left early in the mornings, wandered around all day looking for free Wi-Fi to apply for jobs, and came back late at night to avoid awkward small talk. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to not be a burden. But deep down, I felt like one. Lying on that couch night after night, I had too much time to think. I thought about where I went wrong, why I didn't save more, why I didn't learn about money earlier, why I didn't prepare for uncertainty. That night, with $4.12 in my bank account and a broken spirit, I reached a moment of total silence, not the peaceful kind. The kind that comes when your mind has no more excuses, no more justifications, just truth. The truth that I had failed, and then something strange happened. I felt calm, not because things were okay, but because I had finally reached the bottom. There was no further to fall. I knew this was it, the turning point. I whispered to myself, this is the lowest it gets. From here I go up. It wasn't a motivational speech, it was a vow. A quiet promise to myself that I wouldn't stay here. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The couch springs ached beneath me, but I didn't care. I couldn't lie there anymore. I found an old notebook in my bag and wrote down 3 things. First, I would never let money control me again. I'd learn how it worked, even if it took years. Second, I'd say yes to any legal, honest work that paid me $1. No pride, just survival. Third, I would document the journey, even if no one watched or cared. I wanted a record of the climb back up. I titled the first page, January 3rd, Day 0, $4.12 in the bank. No job, no home. But I have one body, one brain, 24 hours, and one friend with a couch. Let's see what I can do. In that moment, everything became simple. I didn't need a 5-year plan or a dream job. I just needed to earn enough to survive today and then do it again tomorrow. I started listing out anything I could do to make cash within a week. Delivery driving, odd jobs, cleaning gigs, moving help, dog walking. I didn't care what it looked like. I just needed momentum. The shame was still there, but it didn't matter as much anymore. I was done trying to look like I had it all together. Now, I just wanted to move forward, even 1 inch at a time. Rock bottom taught me a lot. Not just about money, but about silence, pride, and the people who stay when you have nothing. I don't romanticize that time in my life. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I also wouldn't erase it. Because that was the moment I stopped being a victim of my circumstances and started taking responsibility for my life. I didn't know it then, but that night on the couch with $4.12 and nothing else was the start of everything that came next. Not because something magical happened, but because I finally stopped lying to myself. That's the thing about hitting the bottom. It gives you solid ground to push off from. That's exactly what I plan to do. The morning after my silent promise to myself, I didn't feel inspired. I didn't feel motivated. I felt hungry, not just emotionally or mentally, literally hungry. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in almost a full day. I poured water from the kitchen sink into an old coffee mug and sat in the hallway with my notebook open. That list I wrote the night before stared back at me. Delivery driving, dog walking, manual labor, cleaning gigs, whatever would get me one step away from broke. I didn't care how small the first step was, I just needed it to be forward. I borrowed Jordan's old tablet, barely functional with a cracked screen, and connected to the apartment's shaky Wi-Fi. I started applying to everything on Craigslist and a few job boards, looking for strong helper to assist with moving furniture. $80 for 4 hours. I messaged the number listed, available immediately. Ready to work hard. Can start today. Within an hour, I got a reply. Come to 18th and Western by 2 p.m. Wear gloves if you have them. I didn't have gloves, but I had shoes. That would have to do. I arrived 20 minutes early, heart pounding. A guy in his late 30s with a thick jacket and a Bluetooth headset sized me up and asked, "You the guy from Craigslist?" I nodded. Good. Grab that dolly and start with those boxes. No handshake, no small talk, just work. The job was brutal. The boxers were heavier than I expected, and the apartment we were emptying was on the 3rd floor. No elevator. I hadn't done physical labor like this in years, and my legs were burning within the first half hour. But every time I wanted to stop, I thought about the couch, the $4.12, and the taste of instant noodles I had to force down the night before. I reminded myself, this pain was temporary. Staying broke forever would be worse. 4 hours later, sweat-soaked and sore, the guy handed me a crumpled $80 bill and muttered, "Good work, man." That moment was strangely emotional. It was the first time in weeks, maybe months, that I had earned something again. I wasn't proud of the job itself, but I was proud I'd said yes to it. I took that $80 and walked into a local grocery store. Instead of rushing to the snack aisle like I normally would have, I walked slowly, buying only what I needed. Bread, eggs, instant rice, bananas, peanut butter. No junk, no soda, no emotion-fueled purchases. I spent $24.19 and kept the rest. That was the first budget I had stuck to in my adult life. That night, I returned to Jordan's apartment and cooked a real dinner. Scrambled eggs and toast. Simple, but hot and satisfying. I wrote again in the notebook. January 4th earned $1.80. First money in over a month. Spent $24. Saving the rest, I can do this. I read that line over and over like a mantra. The next morning, I did the same thing. I looked for more physical jobs. Moving, cleaning, anything. Within a week, I'd worked for short-term gigs, each paying between $60 to $100. It wasn't stable income, but it was fuel. I now had over $200 saved up in cash. I still didn't have a permanent job or a clear path forward, but for the first time since losing my job, I was in motion. Then, on day 6, I walked into a small pizza shop and noticed a handwritten sign taped to the front window. Help wanted, delivery driver. nights plus weekends. I didn't have a car, but I had seen delivery drivers using bikes around the neighborhood. I asked the manager if I could apply using my bike. He shrugged and said, "Sure, if you're fast and reliable, we'll give you a shot." That night, I started my first delivery shift. I made $53 in tips, plus a small hourly wage. It wasn't glamorous, but I felt like a machine, delivering pizza, dodging traffic, earning honest cash. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked every single night. Rain, cold, sore legs, none of it mattered. I was earning again about $300 to $400 per week from deliveries and odd jobs. I opened a new checking account and forced myself to deposit everything. I created my first real budget. 50% went to essentials like food, 30% went to a future get out of Jordan's couch fund, and 20% went to a savings jar I labeled opportunity. That opportunity jar became sacred. I didn't touch it, not even when I was tempted to buy a secondhand pair of wireless headphones or a jacket I didn't really need. I told myself that jar would be for the moment I discovered something bigger, a better job, a business idea, a chance to change my life for real. It was during one of those late-night pizza runs that a customer complimented the hand-drawn sketch I had doodled on the receipt while waiting for their order to be ready. "Did you draw this? That's pretty cool." "You ever think about selling your art?" I laughed it off. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. That comment kept echoing in my mind. I hadn't thought about art or design in years. Back in high school, I used to design logos for fun on old free software. Maybe, just maybe, I still had that skill in me somewhere. The next day, I went to the public library and spent 2 hours on one of their free-use computers researching online freelance platforms. I discovered Fiverr and Upwork. At first, I was overwhelmed. Everyone seemed more talented, more established, but I remembered my promise. Say yes to anything legal, ethical, and honest that paid. So I signed up for Fiverr. I didn't have a laptop or expensive design software, but I found some browser-based free tools and created my first gig. Simple logo design. Starting at $10, I expected nothing. But 3 days later, someone messaged me with an order. I was terrified. What if I messed it up? What if they hated it? I stayed up until 3 a.m. on the library computer finishing that logo. I submitted it and held my breath. The next morning, I got a 5-star review and a $10 payment. It felt like $1 million. That $10 meant more to me than any paycheck I'd earned before, because I made it with my own creativity, not my muscles or my hustle. It gave me a glimpse of something bigger, the idea that maybe I could create money, not just chase it. That tiny spark gave me hope. And hope, when you're just coming out of rock bottom, is like oxygen. I still had a long way to go. I was still sleeping on a couch, still barely scraping by, but something had changed. I was no longer drowning. I was swimming, slowly, clumsily, but forward. And that was everything. That first $10 logo changed the way I looked at money. Till then, every dollar I'd earned had come from physical works, sweat, time, hours I could never get back. But this was different. I had created something on a computer, and someone, somewhere, decided it was worth paying for. Even though it wasn't perfect, even though I'd used free tools and worked on a library computer with a ticking 60-minute limit, someone thought it had value. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had something to offer besides muscle and desperation. I took that money and didn't spend it. Not a cent. I added it to my little opportunity jar and wrote a note beside it, earned with my brain, not my back. That became the spark for what would soon become a quiet obsession. Over the next few days, I used every free hour I could to research design basics. I went down YouTube rabbit holes, watched free online courses, read articles on typography, color theory, logo composition, anything I could get my hands on without paying a dime. I found ways to practice using browser-based tools and a glitchy, refurbished tablet Jordan let me borrow in the evenings. I started improving fast. I wasn't trying to become the best designer in the world. I just wanted to be good enough to make someone happy with the service they bought. That became my goal. Over-deliver every time, even if I was only getting paid $10. My Fiverr profile started to get attention. Not a lot, just a trickle. 1 order turned into 2, 2 became 5, Soon, I was getting maybe 1 gig a day. It wasn't much, but it was something. The jobs ranged from logos to Instagram banners, even a flyer for a local dog grooming business. Every single order mattered. I treated each like a $1,000 project. Even though the most I ever made from one at that point was $25, I responded fast. I asked questions, I submitted early. And I always included a little bonus, an extra version of the logo or a small matching icon, something unexpected. And people noticed. Reviews rolled in, my ratings stayed high, and slowly Fiverr's algorithm started favoring me. Within about 2 months, I had made close to $800 total from freelance gigs. It still felt unreal. Now, I was delivering pizzas by night, freelancing by day, and living on a couch that squeaked every time I rolled over. But I was building something. My confidence, my income, my independence. I stopped feeling like a charity case and started feeling like a man with a plan. Around this time, I also started budgeting more seriously. I used a notebook. No fancy apps, no spreadsheets. Just handwritten categories. Food, essentials, savings, opportunity, and debt. Every dollar I earned had a job. I started tracking my spending down to the cent. I stopped buying takeout entirely. Switched to bulk, rice and beans, eggs, canned tuna. I kept my grocery budget under $30 a week. I learned to stretch everything. If I got an extra tip from deliveries, it went straight into savings. If I earned more on Fiverr than expected, I put half toward a future laptop fund and half toward my debt. Speaking of debt, that was the next monster I had to face. I had just over $6,000 on a maxed out credit card from my jobless period. I had been ignoring it, pretending it would somehow disappear, but I knew better. Interest was stacking like bricks on my shoulders, so I made a plan. I researched the debt snowball method and chose to tackle the smallest balance first. It wasn't much, but paying off even $300 felt like victory. I called the bank and asked for a lower interest rate. They said no. I asked again a week later. Still no, but I kept trying. Eventually, they offered me a one-time hardship program that locked in a lower rate for 6 months. It wasn't a miracle, but it was enough to keep me going. Everything I was doing felt small, but those small things started adding up. In less than 3 months from that $4.12 rock bottom moment, I had saved over $1,200. Paid off nearly $900 in credit card debt. I had an active Fiverr side hustle bringing in around $400 to $600 a month. I was still delivering pizzas at night, which gave me another $1,000 monthly on average. Between the two, I was earning more than I had at my old office job. The difference? I had zero lifestyle inflation. No apartment, no car payment, no subscriptions, no unnecessary spending. I lived like I was still broke, because in many ways I still was. But now I had control. Now I had momentum. One afternoon, Jordan and I were eating leftover rice and eggs when he said, "Dude, you've really flipped it around, huh?" I smiled and shrugged. "I'm trying." He nodded. "No, man, you're doing it." That meant a lot. Jordan had seen the worst of me. He never judged, never pressured me to move out, never made me feel less than. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. I had saved up enough for a deposit on a room in a shared apartment not too far from the library where I still worked on my gigs. It wasn't too much, $400 a month for a room with 2 roommates and a busted heater. But it was mine, my first step back into independence. I moved in with nothing but 2 duffel bags and a mattress I bought secondhand. I carried it 3 blocks by hand because I didn't want to spend $30 on a delivery van. I slept on the floor for the first night, exhausted but happy. The next morning, I made instant coffee and sat down with my notebook. I flipped back through the pages from day 0 to now. It wasn't flashy. I hadn't gone viral. I hadn't struck gold. But I had done what I said I would. I took nothing, literally, and turned it into something. It's not just income, but identity. Not just money, but purpose. That $10 logo gig had opened a door I didn't even know existed. And now that I was inside, I wasn't planning on leaving. I was just getting started. The first night in my new room felt strangely quiet. Not because it was peaceful, but because, for the first time in months, I didn't hear Jordan moving around in the kitchen, or the hum of his fridge, or the creak of that cursed couch. I was alone. Just me. My beat-up duffel bags. a mattress on the floor, and a cracked tablet on my lap. There was no furniture, no decoration, not even a curtain on the window, but it felt like home because it was mine. No one could kick me out. No one was doing me a favor. I was paying for that space with money I had earned. It mattered more than any bed frame or carpet ever could. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I was comfortable, but because I wasn't stuck anymore. I was moving, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke up and sat cross-legged on the floor with my notebook and a cup of instant coffee. I started writing out my goals. Not the vague get-rich-someday type, but real, specific, measurable goals. First, pay off all my credit card debt within 6 months. Second, save $5,000 by the end of the year. Third, buy a real laptop with my own money. I wrote them in big capital letters, underlined each one. Then I broke them into monthly mini-goals. I didn't want dreams. I wanted targets I could actually hit. Fiverr was still bringing in small but steady income, around $500 to $700 a month now, thanks to better reviews and slightly higher pricing. I had learned that most clients didn't mind paying $25 or $30 if you delivered great work quickly and communicated like a professional, so I built systems. I created templates, message scripts, and a checklist for every order. I saved time and earned more. At the same time, I was still working delivery shifts 3 to 4 nights a week. Those shifts were long, but they were guaranteed cash. Cash I could throw at my credit card debt like rocks at a wall. Every payment chipped away at it. Some weeks I sent in $200, others just $75, but the balance kept dropping, and I kept going. But the biggest shift in this stage of my journey wasn't about money. It was about how I saw myself. I wasn't just a guy trying to survive anymore. I was becoming someone who built his life piece by piece. The pride that came from earning $50 off a design job and choosing not to spend it frivolously was something I couldn't describe. There was power in saying no. No to takeout, no to clothes I didn't need, no to weekends out just to fit in. I had traded social pressure for personal freedom, and I didn't miss the old habits one bit. Then one day, while I was working from the public library on a Fiverr order, I overheard 2 people at the next computer talking about a branding package one of them had paid a few $100s for. I quietly listened as they discussed things I knew how to do. Logo variations, typography guides, color palettes, mock-ups, things I had done already for clients but had never packaged together or priced properly. That conversation lit a fire in me. I went home and spent 3 straight nights building out a new offering. A full brand identity package. Included everything I had been doing separately, just bundled neatly, priced at $250. I posted it. Optimized the title, added new images, and waited. Nothing happened for 5 days. Then, on a Thursday night, I got a message. Startup founder wanted to know if I could build a brand package for their eco-friendly pet supply company. I responded within minutes. We exchanged details. 2 hours later, they ordered. It was the biggest order I'd ever received on Fiverr. I stared at the notification for a full minute before it really hit me. Someone had just trusted me with a $250 project. That weekend, I gave that project everything I had. After that $250 branding package, everything began to feel more real, more intentional. I wasn't just another gig worker fighting for scraps anymore. I was building a service that had value. People were now reaching out to me, asking if I had room in my schedule, as if I were fully booked. I wasn't yet, but that didn't matter. The tone had shifted. The confidence in their messages reflected something I hadn't seen before. Trust. And I was ready to live up to it. With each new project, I started getting bolder. I stopped second-guessing my prices and started charging based on outcome, not just the time it took. Instead of "this design takes me 3 hours, so I'll charge $45, I began asking, what's it worth to the client if their brand looks credible and cohesive? That single shift in mindset changed the way I priced everything. I stopped charging for time and started charging for transformation. And with that new mindset came bigger wins. Within 2 months, I had booked 6 full branding packages, each one between $200 and $400. Some were startups, some were online coaches, and one was even a small indie author launching a book series. I had no idea how these people found me, but they kept coming. My Fiverr income jumped to over $1,000 in a single month for the first time. When I added in my delivery job, I pulled in just over $2,300 that month. I sat there at my tiny desk-can old folding table I'd gotten from a neighbor for $5 in, just stared at my bank balance. It didn't feel like a fluke anymore. This was working. But the real game changer wasn't just money, it was what I did with it. That same month, I made my final payment on the credit card I'd been chipping away at since day one. It was gone. Zeroed out. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stared at the statement for a minute, closed my eyes, and exhaled. That debt had followed me through months of hopelessness. It had sat like a weight on my chest during the worst nights of my life. And now it was gone. I was free. From that moment on, I vowed to never carry a balance again. If I couldn't pay for it in cash, I wouldn't buy it. I took a walk around the block that night. No headphones, no phone, just my thoughts. I started thinking not just about how to make more money, but how to grow it, multiply it. That's when I started researching investing. I didn't know anything about the stock market, only that some people made a fortune in it and others lost their shirts. I wasn't looking to gamble. I wanted something slow, boring, and reliable. I came across index funds, read articles, watched YouTube videos, took notes. Vanguard, Fidelity, S&P 500, DI, wrote it all down. Ow. I decided I'd start small. My goal wasn't to get rich quick. It was to build a habit. So that month, after all my expenses, I took $50 and opened a Roth IRA. Bought into an index fund. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was money I didn't need right now, working for my future. I can't explain how empowering that felt. From there, I doubled down on both income and discipline. Every gig I finished was another brick in the wall. Every time I said no to something unnecessary, new phone, fancy coffee, a random night out, I felt stronger. Not because I was depriving myself, but because I was finally in control. My life was no longer happening to me. I was designing it. Fiverr wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It had become the first real business I'd ever built. And I wasn't planning on stopping anytime soon. It was around the 9th month of my journey when I finally faced the thing I had been putting off for too long, my full debt picture. Up until that point, I had only been attacking the credit card with the highest interest rate. But one night, sat down with a notebook and wrote out every single debt I had, the lingering store card I forgot about, a dental bill that had gone to collections, and an old utility balance from the apartment I left when I hit rock bottom. The morning after I paid off that final loan, I woke up feeling different. Not euphoric, not emotional, just clear. It was like walking out of a storm you'd forgotten you were in. The silence wasn't loud, it was peaceful. I checked my bank app, and for the first time in 2 years, there were no red numbers, no minus signs, no minimum payment due notifications. Just a clean slate and a modest savings account that I had built, dollar by dollar, gig by gig. I made coffee black, as usual. Still the cheap store brand, and sat by the window with my notebook. I looked outside at the street, watching the early delivery trucks roll by. That used to be me, pedaling through the rain, wondering if I'd ever get out of it. And now, I wasn't out of the game, but I was off the ropes. Stable, standing, earning. I didn't write new goals that morning. I let the quiet hang around for a bit longer. It wasn't about momentum in that moment. It was about reflection. I'd spent so long grinding, chasing, fixing, that I hadn't really paused to appreciate what I had built. I thought back to the version of me that had once Googled how to make money online at 2 a.m. It's terrified and exhausted. That guy wouldn't recognize me now. And in a way, I was grateful for the struggle. It taught me patience, discipline, and the kind of grit you can't fake. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Because if getting to zero was phase 1, then building wealth had to be phase 2. The idea of wealth was foreign to me. I didn't grow up talking about investing or portfolios or passive income, but now that I had breathing room, I was ready to learn. I spent the next few weeks deep diving into financial literacy. Books, podcasts, YouTube videos, I consumed everything. The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins became my Bible. I finally understood why people said money works for you. I wasn't just earning and spending anymore, I was growing. I increased my Roth IRA contributions to $150 a month. I opened a brokerage account and started dollar cost averaging into an S&P 500 ETF. Every time Fiverr paid out, I'd skim a percentage right off the top and move it into my investments. It wasn't about timing the market. It was about consistency, about building the habit. And the beauty of it was, I didn't miss the money, because I had already trained myself to live below my means. I knew how to stretch $2.50 into 2 meals. Now that I had more, I didn't need more, I just needed smarter. At the same time, my Fiverr business continued to evolve. I had outgrown just being a designer. My clients started seeing me as a brand strategist, someone who could help them make decisions, not just graphics. So I leaned into it. I redesigned my gig titles, rewrote the descriptions, added video introductions. Crossing that $100,000 milestone didn't feel like fireworks. There was no applause, no confetti, just me at my desk, sipping cheap coffee from a chipped mug, glancing at the spreadsheet and nodding. Quiet pride. That kind of progress, the kind built dollar by dollar, mistake by mistake, doesn't explode. It settles in your bones, rewires you. I wasn't celebrating just the money. I was honoring what it represented. Consistency, patience, ownership, and I wasn't done. In fact, the moment I hit that mark, I knew I needed a new question. Not, how do I get to $100,000? But what does freedom look like from here? I started noticing something strange as I earned more, I wanted less. Not in a minimalist, aesthetic kind of way. I just no longer felt the pull to upgrade. My $300 phone still worked. My old laptop was slightly slow, but it powered the business that brought me this far. I had food, shelter, and savings. My desires had shifted. Didn't want more stuff, I'd wanted more space, more time, more margin. I realized the real luxury isn't leather seats or fancy watches. It's waking up and deciding what to do with your day. That's what wealth meant to me now, control over my time. So I made a plan. My next phase wouldn't be about hustling harder. It would be about optimizing. I asked myself hard questions. Was I working too many hours? Was I saying yes to projects that drained me? Was I still moving with intention or just momentum? The answers were uncomfortable. I had built a powerful income engine, but I hadn't built systems to support the life I wanted long term. So I began redesigning everything. First came boundaries. I stopped replying to messages after 6 p.m. I removed Fiverr from my phone. Stopped saying yes to every gig just because it paid well. It was a mental trap, thinking that more money always meant more success. But I had learned every dollar has a cost. If that dollar robs you of peace, sleep, or energy, it's too expensive. So I began filtering every opportunity through a new question. Will this move me toward or away from freedom? Next came automation. Just 5 hours a week, but it was transformative. She handled client scheduling, sent out invoices, organized files. It felt strange at first, delegating. But I realized if I wanted to grow without burning out, I had to stop doing everything myself. That $100 a week I paid her freed up hours of my time and mental energy. And that energy, I reinvested it into the next stage of growth. I also started documenting everything, every process, every system, every win and mistake. I wasn't just running a business, I was building a playbook, something I could teach, replicate, maybe even sell. The idea of creating scalable knowledge products began to take shape. Could I package my experience into a course, a coaching program, a book? I didn't rush it. I let the idea breathe. But I knew I was shifting from doing to designing. Then I did something bold. I took a week off. No emails, no deadlines, just rest. I had never done that before. I went to a quiet cabin upstate. No internet, just books and silence. At first, I felt anxious, like I was slacking. But by the third day, I felt my mind start to clear. Ideas returned. Creativity bubbled up again. I realized how drained I had become without even noticing. That week off wasn't a luxury, it was fuel. It reminded me why I was doing this in the first place. To live, not to work forever. I got back, I restructured everything. Adjusted my pricing again this time to reflect the full value of my experience, not just the hours. My base package became $750, and I began offering strategy sessions as standalone services. Clients didn't blink. In fact, they respected the clarity. More importantly, I respected myself more, because I was finally valuing my own time like I had always valued theirs. By now, I had made more money in 2 years than I ever thought possible when I was eating ramen in a borrowed apartment, wondering if I'd ever be normal again. But that $100,000 was indeed the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where the rules changed. In the beginning, it was all about survival. Hustle hard, say yes to everything, stay afloat. Then, it shifted into growth. Refine the offer, raise the price, reinvest. Now I was in the third stage, sustainability. This is where most people burn out or level up, and I was determined to do the latter. The dangerous thing about financial success, especially if you come from struggle, is that you start to confuse movement with progress. I had been moving constantly, always building, always working, but was it still the right kind of work? Or had I just trapped myself in a better-looking cage? I started paying attention to how I felt during work, not just what I earned from it. Was I energized or drained? Proud or resentful? There were days I closed a $1,500 deal and felt nothing. There were nights I helped someone with a free resource and felt deeply fulfilled. That contrast made me realize something. Fulfillment doesn't scale linearly with income. After a point, it changes shape. If you don't adapt with it, you'll chase numbers and miss meaning. So I took a step back, not from work entirely, but from the endless forward motion. I gave myself permission to think long-term again. I pulled out a blank notebook and wrote a new question at the top. If I was allowed to work for money starting 1 year from today, how would I prepare for that? It was a crazy question, but it changed everything. It made me see the gaps. I had built income, but not independence. I had mastered one lane of skill branding and design, but I hadn't turned it into assets. I needed leverage. Passive income is a buzzword people throw around like it's a magic trick. But in reality, it's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right work once and letting it work for you repeatedly. So I took everything I had learned, the systems, the mistakes, the pricing, the templates, the email responses, and I started building a digital product suite. It wasn't glamorous. It was Google Docs and Notion templates at first. I launched my first product with 0 ads, just a simple post to the few hundred people who followed my free newsletter. I called it the Freelance Starter Kit and priced it at $29. I told myself if even 10 people bought it, that would be proof of concept. 32 people bought it in the first week, at almost $1,000 from a PDF and a folder of templates I already used myself. That's when it clicked. The real gold was in just in what I was doing. It was in what I had already done. I started carving out 2 days a week strictly for product development. Mondays and Thursdays were no client days. I used them to write, record, build, test. It was hard to say no to quick cash when a client emailed with a rush job, but I stuck to it because the goal was bigger now. Freedom from the treadmill. I also refined my funnel, turned my free newsletter into a value-packed resource with actionable steps. I added a lead magnet, a free 5-day email mini course for aspiring creative freelancers. Within 6 weeks, my email list doubled. My digital product sales reached $2,500 in a single month. I wasn't making millions, but it was consistent, scalable, independent of my time. Around the same time, something wild happened. I got invited to speak at a small virtual summit for freelancers. Nothing big, just a Zoom room with about 80 people. But when I told my story raw, unpolished, just the truth, people resonated. My inbox was flooded the next day with thank you notes, questions, and opportunities. That night, I wrote in my journal, helping others see what's possible is the most valuable thing I've done all year. That was a clue, a signal. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It had value beyond inspiration. It was a blueprint, a case study, a spark. That idea kept growing in me. Then came the decision to build a community, not a course, not a coaching group. True, peer-led, value-driven space where other freelancers could grow together. I called it 100K from scratch. The concept was simple. No gurus, no fluff, just practical support and tools for people trying to replicate what I had done. I set up a private Discord server, created a weekly accountability structure, shared monthly content drops, and opened it to beta members at $10 a month. 35 people joined the first week. The conversations were electric. People helping people. wins being shared, mistakes being learned from in real time. It reminded me of why I started all this in the first place, to take back control. And now I was helping others do the same. At this point, my income was diversified. Fiverr brought in steady service revenue, my website funneled higher-end leads, digital product sales covered core expenses. The community added recurring revenue. Investments continued growing. But the best part wasn't the money, it was the peace. I no longer felt like a prisoner to the grind. If I wanted to take a Friday off and go on a hike, I did. If I wanted to spend a whole day recording a podcast that might not earn a cent, I did. It's because I had built a system around the life I wanted, not the other way around. Then came an opportunity that would terrified me a year earlier. Someone approached me to license one of my products as part of their course bundle. Passive income from something I already built, now reaching an entirely new audience without me lifting a finger. Yes, that single deal brought in $3,400 in 1 week. It made me realize wealth isn't just about how much you earn. It's about how little you have to do to maintain your lifestyle. And for the first time in my life, I was approaching that magical point. Enough. That's when I made the quiet decision to stop chasing bigger. I didn't need a 7-figure brand. I didn't need 100K followers. I needed depth, not scale. I focused on deepening relationships with clients, audience members, collaborators. I replied personally to DMs. I sent handwritten thank you cards to my top customers. I wrote longer, more thoughtful emails. I said no to the projects that didn't align, and something beautiful happened. The more authentic I became, the more my business grew organically, sustainably, soulfully. I ended that year not with a bang, but with balance. My net income for the second year was just over $87,000, bringing my total earnings since rock bottom to well beyond $100,000. But more importantly, my time was mine. My mind was clear. My direction was intentional, and my mission had expanded. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building a legacy. One based on service, not just sales. One that others could learn from, build on, and grow through. That's the power of starting from nothing. You learn to build with intention. You learn to stay grounded. You appreciate every win, and you never forget where you came from. Because when you hit $100,000, the story doesn't end, it just begins a whole new chapter. The moment I crossed the $100,000 mark, a strange silence followed. Not literal silence, life was still moving. Clients were still emailing. My calendar remained full, but inside me, there was this subtle pause, like the pause at the top of a roller coaster before the drop. For 2 years, my mind had been consumed by this goal, to get back on my feet, to build something real, to earn what once felt impossible. And now that it had happened, a quiet question echoed. What now? I used to think that hitting 6 figures would bring a massive celebration, or at least a deep sense of arrival. But instead, it brought perspective. It revealed that the climb wasn't the reward, it was the teacher. And now, with the noise of survival fading, I could finally hear what success was trying to teach me. I began to see how much of my hustle was rooted in fear, not ambition. Fear of being broke again. Fear of going back. Fear of wasting my potential. And while fear can get you started, it can't sustain you. Eventually, you burn out. So I gave myself space to ask harder questions. Who am I when I am not struggling? What do I want my days to actually look like? What am I building beyond income? I started by taking inventory of my life, not just my business. I looked at how I spent my mornings, how often I moved my body, how present I was in conversations. I noticed how quickly I reached for my phone the moment silence settled in. I realized I hadn't taken a real vacation in over 2 years, not because I couldn't but because I didn't trust that things would keep going without me. That was the first clue. The second came when a friend, someone I deeply respected, asked me point blank, "Do you own a business or just a job with extra steps?" That one hit hard, because the truth was, while I had diversified my income, systematized parts of it, and even created community, so much still revolved around me. My time, my decisions, my output. If I disappeared for a month, most of it would slow down or stop entirely. That's when I decided to replace myself, my next big goal. Not to check out or retire early, but to build a machine that could run without me being the engine. I revisited every system in my business and asked, can this be automated? Can someone else do this? Can this be eliminated altogether? I hired a virtual assistant, not full-time, just a few hours a week at first, to handle recurring tasks like client onboarding, email responses, and organizing content. It was terrifying to delegate. I was so used to being the one who did everything that giving up control felt like handing over a piece of my identity. But after the first week, I saw how much mental space it freed up, and in that space, creativity returned. Not the kind of creativity that's fueled by pressure and deadlines, but the kind that comes from curiosity. I found myself dreaming again, sketching ideas for things that didn't need to make money right away, writing essays that weren't for SEO, recording voice notes to myself at 2 a.m. about concepts I wanted to explore deeper. That's when I stumbled on the idea of quiet impact. I didn't want to be the loudest person online. I didn't want to chase virality or build a brand that relied on constant performance. I wanted to build something sustainable, meaningful, and quietly powerful. So I shifted my content strategy. Less quantity, more quality. Fewer posts, more depth. I stopped trying to speak to everyone and focused on speaking deeply to the few who resonated. My engagement dropped at first, but the connection went through the roof. People weren't just liking posts, they were writing back with full paragraphs, sharing how the work impacted them, and many of them became customers, collaborators, or friends. That's when I realized depth scales in a different way. It builds slowly, but it builds trust. Trust is the most valuable currency in any business. Around this time, I also began to invest more seriously, not just in stocks or crypto, but in education. I bought courses on leadership, product strategy, even psychology. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to grow beyond my current skill ceiling. I read books I had skipped before, because they weren't urgent. I listened to long-form podcasts that expanded my thinking. I sought out mentors, not just online, but in real life. One of them, a retired entrepreneur in his 60s, has told me something I'll never forget. You're building momentum now, but what really matters is where that momentum leads. Are you building for admiration or for endurance? That question became a compass for me. I no longer wanted to chase trends or compete for attention. I wanted to build things that could outlast algorithms, so I went deeper into product refinement. I took my digital products and turned them into complete ecosystems. Instead of just selling templates, I created walkthroughs, case studies, and live office hours. I added bonuses that addressed real objections. I bundled complementary tools. I increased prices but also increased value tenfold. And the result? My conversion rates went up. People didn't just buy, they stuck around, referred others, and became part of the story. I realized that in a world where everything is trying to grab your attention, offering real help is a superpower. And it builds something no ad campaign ever could: loyalty. Meanwhile, my community, 100K from scratch, continued to grow, not explosively, but steadily, and that was by design. A limited membership intake to ensure quality. I introduced mentorship pods, where members could support each other. I hosted monthly deep dive calls, not just on business tactics, but on mindset, habits, and fulfillment. The community became a lab, a place where ideas were tested in real time. I learned as much from the members as they did from me. And it reminded me that teaching isn't just about passing down knowledge, it's about creating a space for others to step into their own power. Personally, I started redefining success. I created a life dashboard where I tracked not just revenue, but energy, joy, time freedom, relationships, and creativity. The more I settled into this new season of stability, the more I noticed something unexpected: space. Not just in my schedule, though that too had opened up, but in my thinking. Space to reflect, to refine, to reimagine who I was becoming. The urgency that once fueled me was slowly being replaced with clarity. I no longer felt the need to prove something with every post, every dollar, every win. The scoreboard wasn't external anymore. It lived inside my values. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. That is, when a different kind of challenge emerged. What does it mean to lead when you no longer have anything to prove? In the early days, my content was survival-driven. Everything was about how to get your first client, how to write the perfect pitch, how to set prices that paid the bills. But now, people were coming to me with a different energy. They weren't just asking, how do I start? They were asking, how do I stay? How do I keep going without losing myself? How do I scale without stress? How do I make money without burning out? And the truth was, those questions were harder to answer because they weren't tactical. They were personal, internal, rooted in how people saw themselves, what they believed they deserved, and whether they trusted their own intuition. That's when I realized I wasn't just building tools or products anymore. I was modeling a way of being, and that meant I had to go deeper too. I started journaling again every morning, not for content, not for strategy, just to meet myself on the page. I wrote about what I was afraid to say out loud. I unpacked the stories I was still carrying from when I had nothing. I wrote about the weird guilt that came with earning more than most people I grew up with, and the responsibility I felt to use it wisely. I wrote about my family, the pride in their eyes, the quiet pressure I felt to keep winning, the moments I wished they understood what I was actually doing. That writing became a mirror, and in it, I saw that money had changed me, but not in the way I feared. It hadn't made me greedy. It made me careful. It made me consider the weight of influence, because now people were watching, listening, modeling their own path after mine. And that meant every decision mattered more than ever before. I tightened my boundaries. I became more selective with collaborations, more intentional with my time. I asked myself constantly, is this aligned with who I'm becoming, or is it just a remnant of who I used to be? I also reevaluated my long-term goals, not just financially, but holistically. I created a 5-year vision document, one that outlined not just income targets, but the kind of lifestyle I wanted, how often I wanted to work, where I wanted to live, how I wanted to feel on a random Tuesday afternoon. I mapped out the kind of friendships I wanted to nurture, the kind of creative risks I wanted to take, even the kind of parent or partner I hoped to be someday. And then, I reverse engineered everything. I asked, if that's the life I want, what do I need to stop doing now? That question changed my calendar. It changed my content. It changed how I showed up every single day. One of the biggest shifts was how I approached marketing. In the beginning, I chased attention. I studied hooks, trends, SEO. I built funnels like puzzles, and it worked. But now, I realize that attention is fleeting. What matters more is resonance. Did people feel something when they saw my work? Did they remember it a week later, a month? Did it shape their decisions, even in small ways? That became my new metric. Not views, but depth. And to reach that depth, I had to slow down. Had to stop creating for the algorithm and start creating for the individual. I imagined one person, someone stuck, scared, hopeful, and I wrote for them. I recorded voiceovers for them, built products for them, and the wild thing. The more specific I got, the more people resonated. Because specificity is where trust lives. This season also brought me closer to a truth I had resisted for a long time. I didn't just want to sell things. I wanted to shape things, ideas, industries, conversations. I wanted to push back on hustle culture, on the myth that success has to come at the cost of your health or relationships. I wanted to champion a more sustainable model for creators and freelancers. One rooted in self-awareness, ethics, and long-term thinking. So I began writing more openly about my mistakes. I talked about burnout, about the months I almost quit, about the time I scaled too fast and hated every minute of it, about the launch that flopped, the product no one bought, the client I shouldn't have said yes to. And the response? Overwhelming. People didn't lose respect for me, they respected me more. Because honesty is magnetic. We're all just looking for permission to be human. When I made a decision that surprised even me, I took a full month off. No client work, no launches, no content schedule. Just me, a small cabin near the woods, some books, and a few journals. It was the most uncomfortable thing I had done all year. First I felt lost, unproductive. Like I was wasting time, but by week 2, something shifted. My thoughts slowed down. I noticed birdsong, cooked real meals. I slept without dreaming of email. I felt still, and in that stillness, I heard the next version of myself calling. It's not louder, just clearer. She wasn't more successful. She was more grounded, more honest, more focused, and she wasn't chasing more. She was curating better. When I came back, I redesigned everything. I simplified my offer suite. I trimmed my team, structured my calendar to protect my best hours. I removed 40% of the automations I had spent months building because I finally realized that convenience wasn't the same as clarity. I wanted fewer moving parts, not more. I also revisited my pricing model, not to raise it arbitrarily, but to reflect the transformation, not just the time. I created a value ladder that allowed people to engage at different levels, from free to affordable to high impact. And every tier was crafted with care. Nothing was filler. Everything mattered. Financially, this approach didn't just sustain my business, it grew it. But more importantly, it gave me back my soul. I was no longer sprinting toward an imaginary finish line. I was building with rhythm, with rest, with reverence. And from that place, the work got better. My emails got more personal. My courses got deeper. My community got tighter. And slowly, I began to be known not just for what I sold, but for how I made people feel. That, I realized, is the real brand. Legacy isn't built in a single launch or viral post. It's built in consistency, in integrity, in showing up even when no one is clapping. It's built in the quiet choices. To underpromise and overdeliver, to care about details no one sees, to walk away from money that costs too much of your peace. And that's what this next chapter is about for me. Not scaling faster. It's not earning more just for the sake of it, but deepening everything I've already built, rooting it, protecting it, letting it mature. Because I didn't come this far to recreate a cage out of gold. I came this far to remember who I was before the world told me who I had to be. And now, with that clarity, I'm finally building not just for income, but for impact. What surprised me most as I moved deeper into this new season wasn't how much I had changed, it was how much my definition of success had. In the beginning, success looked like freedom from worry. I just wanted the bills paid on time, a roof over my head, enough food in the fridge, and maybe a little extra to stop feeling like I was running a race barefoot on gravel. Then it became about choices, having the option to say no, to create my own path, to pick the work I loved instead of what paid the most. But now, something even more profound was taking shape. I no longer cared about just growing my business. I cared about growing other people's belief in themselves. That was the real currency, the real wealth. And it started small, quiet emails from readers who told me my story helped them leave a toxic job, or that they finally launched their own product after years of hesitation. I didn't know most of their names. I didn't have to. What mattered was that the work was working, not just for me, but for others. That's when I realized the goal was no longer to achieve, it was to activate. I started offering quiet mentorship, not some flashy hide-a-kit program. It's to honest conversations, one-on-one, with people I believed in. Sometimes we talked strategy. Other times, it was just about belief. Helping them see what they already knew, but had buried under years of fear, comparison, or imposter syndrome. I didn't promote it. I didn't announce it. But it became one of the most fulfilling parts of my week. Because in those conversations, I saw versions of myself. There were earlier me who just needed someone to say, "You're not crazy, you're capable. And yes, it's possible." At the same time, I was slowly learning to build in seasons. When you first start working for yourself, it's easy to forget that humans aren't machines. We're not built to operate at 100% output all year long. But the internet never stops. Notifications don't pause. And if you're not careful, you start confusing momentum with purpose. So I built seasons into my calendar. Creation season, connection season, reflection season, rest season. Each quarter had its own rhythm, its own focus. I stopped expecting myself to be on all the time. Because of that, when I was on, I was powerful, focused, intentional. My launches got tighter, my writing got sharper, and I no longer felt like I was running from burnout. I was building in a way that prevented it. And then something unexpected happened. A client I had worked with early on, one of my first 5-figure branding clients, reached out and asked if I would help teach his team how to build what I had built. Not a rebrand, not a service, a strategy, a blueprint. At first, I hesitated. Teaching a team felt different than teaching freelancers. It meant stepping into more of a consultant role, but I said yes. And in those sessions, I saw the impact of 2 years of quiet mastery. I wasn't just winging it anymore. I had frameworks, I had language, I had stories. I had a clarity that only comes from doing the work in the dark. That project paid well. Sure, but more than that, it reminded me that wisdom is cumulative. You don't even realize how much you know until someone asks you to teach it. That experience sparked something new. I started thinking about legacy, not just in terms of what I left behind, but how I transferred what I had learned. I didn't even want to just create things people use wanted to create things people could build from. So I began developing what I called foundations, a series of guides, not about hacks or quick wins, but about the principles that had quietly powered every part of my journey. Things like ethical pricing, emotional resilience, narrative design, client communication, boundary setting, scarcity versus abundance thinking. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't optimized for virality, but it was real. The feedback was deeper than anything I had made before. At this point, my audience had grown. Not huge, but meaningful. A few thousand people who actually cared, who read the long emails, who sent thoughtful replies, who showed up for the quiet stuff, and that was enough. I didn't need 100,000 followers. I needed 100 true believers who would walk with me, build alongside me, and pass it on. So I started focusing on depth over breadth in every part of my business. My newsletter became my central platform not because it was trendy, but because it was intimate. Every email felt like a letter to a friend. And over time, those letters built trust, built community, built a kind of quiet movement I hadn't even fully noticed. Looking back, I saw how every step of this journey was connected. The ramen nights, the cold emails, the first Fiverr gigs, the burnout, the pivots, the $29 product launch, the tiny summit with 80 people, the client calls that ran long because I cared, the risks I took that didn't work but taught me what did. And now I was here, not at the end, but at a new beginning. A place where money was no longer the main question, but simply a part of a much bigger one. What do I want my life to mean? And the answer, surprisingly, was simple. I wanted to be a permission slip. I wanted someone to read my story and whisper to themselves, if they could do it, maybe I can too. I wanted my work to feel like a mirror, not a megaphone. Not look at me, but look at you. You're capable of more than you think. That's what kept me going now. That's what made me excited to write on slow mornings, to show up to Zoom calls, to keep building, even when no one was watching. Because I know now that $100,000 wasn't the finish line. It was just the first signal. A signal that I had stepped out of survival, that I had enough margin to create, not just react. And with that margin came responsibility. Not pressure, but possibility. The possibility to shape things that outlast me. Not just digital products, but beliefs. Beliefs about what work can look like, what leadership can feel like, what freedom can really mean. And I wasn't alone anymore. Others were walking their version of this path, many of them inspired by my own. That's the ripple effect. That's the true return. But that's why I keep showing up. Not for the incumbent, for the impact. What nobody tells you about crossing a milestone like $100,000 from scratch is that the moment after is eerily quiet. There's no crowd cheering, no internal explosion, no sudden burst of euphoria. It feels more like taking a breath after holding it underwater for a very long time. You come up, you breathe, and then you realize you're not drowning anymore. But now you need to decide where to swim. That's the strange thing about freedom. It requires new muscles. When I was broke, every decision was made from a place of fear or necessity. I didn't have the luxury of asking big questions like what's my mission, or what kind of life do I want in 10 years. Back then it was just, how do I make rent next month? But now I had space. Mental space, emotional space, calendar space. And in that space, deeper questions started rising up, ones I didn't have answers to yet. So I started asking them out loud. In journal entries, in late-night voice notes to myself, conversations with close friends who were also building from the ground up. One question kept returning. What kind of person do I need to become in order to sustain this life? Because the truth is, getting to $100,000 had required one version of Mitha, scrappy, obsessed work hours version. But staying in a place of alignment, sustainability, and purpose required something else entirely. I needed to become someone who knew how to slow down without guilt, who could make decisions from vision, not just velocity, who didn't measure their worth by income or output. That wasn't easy, because for 2 straight years I had been proving something to myself, to others, maybe even to the past version of me who thought I was going to fail. But now, I had nothing left to prove, only something to protect, and that required a different relationship to time. Time became my new obsession. How I used it, how I respected it, how I protected it. I used to fill every gap in my calendar with just one more task. Now I left white space on purpose, not because I was lazy, but because I understood that ideas don't come in chaos, they arrive in quiet. I began walking more, thinking more, reading things that weren't business-related at all. I returned to poetry, music, long conversations without a purpose. And you know what happened? My work got better. My product ideas were sharper. My writing was deeper. My strategy became clearer. Because I had finally given my brain what it needed to thrive, not just hustle, but harmony. And something else emerged too. Joy. Quiet joy. The kind that isn't flashy or post-worthy, but runs deep. Joy in writing something that made someone cry a good way. Joy in getting a random email from someone across the world who said my story helped them quit a job they hated. Joy in walking into a local cafe on a Thursday morning, laptop free, knowing my systems were running without me. That's a level of freedom I didn't even know I was chasing. It wasn't about not working, it was about choosing when and why I work. From that place, I made a decision that surprised even me. I paused all growth goals. No new followers targets, no sales projections, no launch deadlines. I gave myself a quarter, 3 full months to simply listen to my audience, to my inner voice, to the patterns in the market that nobody was talking about yet. I became a student again. I studied community design. I dove deep into digital minimalism. I examined how creators were building long-term ecosystems, not just one-off funnels. And out of that research, a new vision began to form. I saw the next evolution, not a bigger business, but a more alive one. One that didn't depend on me grinding endlessly. One that could grow roots. So I mapped it out, not like a sales funnel, but like a garden. What needed daily watering? What could grow slowly? What would bloom in the right season? This metaphor changed everything. I wasn't just a creator anymore, I was a cultivator. Of ideas, of people, systems. And with that lens, I became ruthless with distractions. If something didn't align with the garden I was tending, it had to go. That included saying no to some very tempting offers. One company wanted to acquire one of my product lines for a flat payout. Another wanted me to co-host a large-scale course with guaranteed revenue. A few years earlier, I might have jumped at the chance. But now, I asked a different question. Does this help me build the life I want 10 years from now? And most of the time, the answer was no. I declined, gracefully, quietly. And every time I did, I felt stronger, not because I was leaving money on the table, but because I was choosing something even more valuable: integrity. And here's the unexpected upside. The more I stayed in integrity, the more the right opportunities found me. It's not mass market deals, but aligned collaborations. Clients who respected boundaries. Partners who shared values. Mentors who didn't want to change me, but help refine what was already working. That's the gift of clarity. It becomes a filter, not a cage. By the end of that year, something had shifted in me. I no longer introduced myself by what I did. I spoke more about what I believed, about how I worked, about why I built the way I built. People leaned in, because in a world obsessed with scaling fast, there's something magnetic about someone who chooses to grow deeply. That became my focus now: deep growth, deep impact, deep joy. That's what segment 13 is about. Not the fireworks, but the foundation. The slow, thoughtful, values-driven life you get to build when you stop chasing everything and start living with clarity. And it turns out that clarity is the best kind of wealth. The real wealth, I've come to realize, was never just the $100,000. It was who I had to become to earn it, and who I chose to remain afterward. Money solved the immediate fears, sure, but identity, that took longer. You don't grow a business from nothing without peeling back layers, without confronting who you are under pressure, under failure, under success. And what I learned over and over again is this: success will ask you to shed just as often as it asks you to build. Shed the need to please everyone. Shed the addiction to praise. Shed the story that more money equals more worth. Once I let those go, something else emerged. Stillness. And in that stillness, I heard the clearest voice I'd ever known my own. It told me to stop rushing, to stop measuring, to create from truth, not trend. So that's what I did. I deleted half of what wasn't aligned anymore, offers that didn't reflect my values, social media strategies that felt empty, products I had outgrown, and I replaced them with presence. With fewer things done better, with more intention, the courage to tell people, this is what I do, this is how I help. If it's not for you, that's okay. That level of honesty didn't shrink my business. It deepened it. Clients came in slower, but stayed longer. Projects weren't just profitable, they were peaceful. For the first time, I felt like I was designing not just a career, but a life. That life looked different than I imagined it would. Quieter, simpler, but richer in ways I couldn't have known to ask for back when I had $3 in my account and a Google Doc of desperate ideas. I didn't need a luxury car. I didn't need to scale to prove anything. I needed to feel proud of how I showed up each day. I needed to trust myself. I did. Fully. That's another kind of freedom no one tells you about: the freedom of self-trust. It changes how you walk into rooms, how you send invoices, how you respond to setbacks, because you know you faced worse. And you know what you're made of now. I began thinking less about outcomes and more about artistry. Not in the romantic sense, but in the practical, deliberate, skilled sense. Everything I made, every email, every product, every conversation, I wanted it to feel crafted, not cranked out. My process slowed down, but my quality went up. My reputation deepened. And my audience, though not massive, became incredibly loyal. They didn't just consume, they believed. That belief became the fuel I never had at the beginning. Back then, I was pushing the boulder up the hill alone. Now, there were others pushing with me. And that changed everything. I also started writing more, not for SEO or strategy, but for legacy. Quiet essays, letters to my future self, stories about the behind-the-scenes moments that never made it to Instagram. These writings weren't monetized. They were medicine. They reminded me of why I started. They reminded me that I didn't build this life to escape work. I built it to do meaningful work in a way that didn't cost me my soul. And those essays started resonating with others too. People began asking, can I share this with my team, my students, my daughter? It's when I knew this story wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to us, the builders, the quiet dreamers, the people doing hard things with soft hearts. Looking around, I saw others at various stages of their own $0 to $100,000 journey. Some just starting, some burned out halfway, and some pivoting after hitting six figures and wondering, now what? And to all of them, I wanted to say, there's no one way. You don't have to hustle like everyone else. You don't have to go viral. You don't have to lose yourself. You just have to stay close to your core. The rest will follow. Maybe slower than you'd like, maybe messier than you planned, but it will follow. Because integrity compounds, so does courage. So does clarity. So I kept building. Not faster, not bigger, but truer. And in doing that, I discovered something surprising this life. It wasn't just sustainable, it was joyful. Not every day, but enough days. And that's all I ever wanted. It's not passive income, not perfect strategy. It's just enough good days, strung together to make a meaningful life. A life where work and values hold hands. A life where money serves but doesn't rule. A life where I get to say yes because I want to, not because I have to. Now, when people ask me how I got here, I tell them the truth. I started with nothing but a deadline and desperation. I made more mistakes than I can count. I cried on the kitchen floor more times than I'll admit. But I kept going. I asked for help. I listened to my gut. I honored my energy, pivoted when it made sense, and stayed put when it didn't. And slowly, with more patience than I thought I had, it added up. Not just to $100,000, but to a life I wouldn't trade for anything. And that's what segment 14 is, the climax. Not a grand reveal, but a gentle arrival. A moment of breath, of quiet pride, of looking around and realizing, I built this. And I like who I became along the way. I used to think stories like this ended with fireworks, some dramatic moment where everything clicked and a triumphant soundtrack played. But that's not how real life works. Real life is quieter. Real growth is subtle. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up in the tiny decisions you make every single day. Like choosing to stay calm when a payment is late. Like deciding to rest even when there's work to be done. Like trusting that showing up with integrity is the marketing strategy. That's how I got here, not through magic or shortcuts, but through small, often unseen acts of courage, discipline, and belief. 2 years ago, I was broke, scared, and ashamed. I didn't know where to start. I only knew I couldn't stay where I was. So I took one step, then another, then another. And when I fell and I did fall, I learned. I adjusted. I asked better questions. I let go of the fantasy of a perfect plan and embraced the messy beauty of iteration. That mindset, more than any course or coach or funnel, is what carried me forward. I learned to bet on myself, not recklessly, not arrogantly, but quietly, consistently, day after day. What I've realized since is this: almost everything I thought I needed, more followers, more likes, more reach, was noise. What I actually needed was clarity, clear values, clear boundaries, clear offers, clear energy. Clarity simplified everything. It made decisions easier. It made my message stronger. It made the right people come closer. And when that happened, I no longer had to chase, I could attract. So that shift from pushing to pulling changed my entire relationship with business. But more than business, it changed me. I no longer measure myself by income, though yes, I still track it. I no longer obsess over growth charts, though I still set goals. What I care about now is alignment. Is this offer aligned with how I want to live? Is this partnership aligned with who I want to become? Is this routine aligned with my energy, my body, my relationships? These questions are now my compass, and the answers keep me grounded. The money, $100,000, and growing is just a byproduct. A beautiful one, yes. One that has opened doors and eased burdens and allowed me to give back in ways I once only dreamed of. But it's not the point. The point is who I became. The point is the trust I built with myself. The point is the people I helped along the way. That's the real win. That's the true legacy. If you're reading this and you're still at zero financially, emotionally, spiritually, I want you to know it's not too late. You are not too far gone. You are not behind. The timeline you're watching on social media is not real. What's real is this moment, this breath, this choice to begin. And if you can honor that moment with your full self, if you can decide that your future deserves a chance, then you're already further along than you think. You're already building something powerful. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfect. Don't wait until you're confident. Confidence comes later. Start with courage. Start with action. Start with the truth that you are capable of creating something meaningful, even if you can't see it clearly yet. Especially then, as I close this story, I'm not riding off into the sunset. I'm still here, still building, still learning, but now I do it with joy, with rest, with trust, and with a sense of spaciousness I never thought was possible. That's what financial freedom gave me, not just options, but peace. And I'll never take that for granted. So this is the end of the story and the beginning of the next chapter. Because it doesn't stop here. It evolves. It deepens. It keeps going.
Gosh.
Just like you will. To anyone starting at $0, I say this: begin messy. Begin afraid. Begin without all the answers. Just begin. You might just surprise yourself.